Every 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
All right, everyone, welcome to today's ASRG webinar. But before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about ASRG and get some of the legal stuff out of the way. ASRG is a nonprofit organization founded to support the development of the automotive security industry. We have developed a platform and a community to share knowledge, communicate through networks, and to build value with collaboration. This is a community for you, built by you, with the goal to protect our friends and family when using automotive products. If you want to learn more about ASRG or get more involved, please visit our website at www.asrg.io or send us an email at hello@asrg.io. Before we jump into the presentation today, let's get some of the legal stuff taken care of. The views and opinions expressed in this webinar are the views of those that have made them. They do not represent views or opinions of ASRG and are to be considered as informational. The use of this information is to be used by the individual and/or organization at their own risk.
Thanks for being here. It's going to be quite fun. And the title of this session today is How to Hack Teslas and Why the Automotive Ecosystem Needs to be Secure. We will deep dive into, how to hack Teslas, and then also talk about the automotive ecosystem, cybersecurity in mobility. So there will be something for everyone, whether you are a seasoned automotive cybersecurity professional working at mobility cybersecurity companies or OEMs, or if you're just starting out in the automotive security space, there will be something for everyone. Who am I? So let's talk a bit about myself so you know who I am and why I'm having this talk and what my journey into cybersecurity was. And first of all, my name is David Colombo. I started programming at the age of 10 years old. I was always a very, very curious person and interested in technology, and I always wanted to know how it works. So as soon as I got my first phone, I already tried to figure out what is possible. And then when I got my first laptop, it just took off because there was so much possible. And I always asked myself, how does it work? And I wanted to understand how does it work. So I learned all the basics there. I learned how to program, how operating systems work, how networks work. And then I got into cybersecurity at around the age of 13, which was super interesting because you could already, it actually started when I found my first vulnerability, which allowed me to do stuff with an application that I wasn't supposed to be able to do. And then I got hooked, and I was super interesting how the topic is in depth. And you could already see that cybersecurity is going to be one of the most pressing challenges of tomorrow. And being a so super interesting topic at the same time, it just became my passion and I went all into it. So even though school was on the next day, I spent like all my time until 3 a.m. learning about cybersecurity, learning about technology, going into the topic. And yeah, then I dropped out of school at the age of 15. I was in the 10th grade. I'm based in Germany. So I went to school here in Germany, and I was asking myself, why should I sit here and learn like Latin or do poem analysis if I could be out there protecting critical infrastructure, protecting organizations from cyber attacks? And then I made a decision, I have to drop out, I have to quit school, which isn't easy in Germany. It's quite hard actually. But there was a person at the German Chamber of Commerce who understood what I was saying. He understood what I was complaining about, and then he helped me to get a special permission where I only have to go to school like 1 or 2 days a week and can use the rest of the time to further build my skills and then to start my own cybersecurity company, which I ultimately did. Started my own company to be able to help all of the organizations out there to protect themselves from cyber attacks, to be able to have impact on the world, because there's so much we have to do in cybersecurity. There's so much we have to improve. We will also talk about this a bit later. in regards of automotive and mobility cybersecurity. And then I also started doing cybersecurity research. So I published globally recognized cybersecurity research now at the age of 19. This has been seen on Bloomberg, TechCrunch, CNN, and everywhere. That's also part of the session here, the security research regarding gaining access to Teslas around the world. Then I also got invited to the World Government Summit this year as speaker about cybersecurity, where I just spotlighted the issues and what governments should do about cybersecurity, which regulations they should implement, because it is just such important topic and it's a key threat to a fully digitalized future. So I'm all in there. The session actually also got listened to by the Crown Prince of Dubai. He joined into the session to hear about what I had to say about cybersecurity, which I think is great because then you actually get it to people who have the impact to change things. And the last point, I intentionally left it blank because there are so many awesome opportunities right now, and I'm taking a look at where to go. And I really think I'm going all into mobility cybersecurity because this is a topic which is just like really pressing. We have to take a look at it. We have to take action now, but we will get to this a bit later. So, topics in this talk, I already told you that there will be something for everyone. We will take a look at 3 main topics. Of course, how I hacked multiple Teslas around the world. So what I was able to do, the vulnerability behind it, the vulnerability disclosure process, how I reported it, how the parties involved reacted, and then also some key learnings from the experience I had about automotive cybersecurity. Then we will talk a bit about why the automotive ecosystem needs to be secure, how automotive attack surfaces are expanding, why a holistic approach is important if we talk about this topic. And then also we are going a bit into cybersecurity and mobility in general, because this is truly one of the most pressing challenges of tomorrow. And we will take a look at the outlook of the future of mobility cybersecurity, the future of mobility in general, because this is going to be an important topic in the future. And also what we as community, as organizations working together, as OEMs, should do to ensure a secure future, what steps I think we should take there to build a secure future. So let's dive into how to hack Teslas and how I managed to hack into over 25 Teslas around the world through a critical vulnerability in a third-party application. The talking points here will include third-party and first-party applications for modern vehicles, because that's something that is getting into the focus now when we are digitalizing all the cars out there, all the apps, all the server connection. We will talk a bit about API security, because it's quite interesting to observe that nearly every modern car has an API now where they communicate with the automaker, the OEM, to have fleet controls there. So we will take a look at this also. Then the responsible disclosure process of this whole situation, because like, what do you do? I mean, you have a 19-year-old sitting here in Germany gaining access to Teslas all around the world in multiple countries. And what do you do now? What are the steps that you have to take to get this resolved? We will take a look at this. And then also about critical vehicle features getting hacked, because this wasn't like only being able to honk the horn, but this had also like a bit more impact. And you probably already heard about the story, so you might think, yeah, that was the story, because the story just went like all around the world. It was really crazy. There was such a media attention, such a reporting, and all the big newspapers reached out to me when they heard about this, which was quite crazy. It was a crazy experience to have your own face in stuff like TechCrunch, because that's the tech newspapers you normally read. And then I had my own featured article in there regarding how I gained access to Teslas around the world. But I think it's really great that there is that huge media attention behind it when we are talking about cybersecurity in critical aspects, because we really have to take this serious as, basically as a whole world, to take a look at this topic. And now I want to use that momentum that I got from the security research regarding those Teslas here to further push the topic of cybersecurity, because if you take a look what features I was able to control, it's quite interesting. So I was able to query the actual vehicle location, so where the vehicle was, where it was parked. I could also see it driving around live. I was able to turn off the sentry mode. Those who already know about Tesla probably know what the sentry mode is. So the sentry mode basically is the security mode of Teslas, which uses the cameras around the Teslas to detect suspicious people around it, to record people breaking into the Tesla. And I was able to turn that off, which already is something, it is a bit worrying. But I was also able to unlock the vehicle doors, which now it gets into a really critical aspect, because then I also was able to start keyless driving. So I could just go ahead. I mean, you are probably taking a look at this and thinking, yeah, he could steal the car, because that's basically what I would be able to do when connecting all of those things. I could query where the Tesla is, then go there, turn off the sentry mode, unlock the doors, get in there and start keyless driving. Some of you might think, well, luckily I have pin to drive enabled, and pin to drive in general is a great recommendation, because pin to drive basically is, if you get into your Tesla and you want to start driving, then you have to type in a passcode on the Tesla screen, so the Tesla enables you to drive. But through the method I will display, I was able to bypass pin to drive. So even if your Tesla has pin to drive, I would still have been able to steer your Tesla if the Tesla was affected by this vulnerability, which is quite interesting. I personally would recommend that pin to drive is required, no matter if it's started via an API or the car or the key card, or yeah, there are so many ways to unlock and start Teslas. But I would recommend that pin to drive is required anywhere. But it wasn't required there, so I quite literally could have stolen the Tesla. But there was also like a lot more, like flashing the lights or controlling certain infotainment features. So I could have sent a video to the Tesla to display, or I could have sent a song there. I could have controlled the volume, skipped the song. So all the infotainment features. And then also controlling the temperature settings. So like cooling, heating, including seat heating, heating the steering wheel, and also a lot more. So if your garage doors were connected to affected Teslas, then I would have been able to open those garage doors and stuff like this. So it's quite an extensive list. Also with like some critical, in my opinion, critical features, and you probably also think that. And now we have to talk about, how did this happen? So how was I able to get access to those features, to those Teslas? And when I wrote my write-up, I basically titled it How to Hack Teslas Around the World by Accident and Curiosity. Or I think the exact title was How I Was Able to Hack Over 25 Teslas Around the World by Accident and Curiosity. Because that's basically the two main parts here. By accident, why? Because I didn't even plan to hack Teslas. I didn't even plan to do like security research regarding Teslas now. So I wasn't sitting down at my desk and I was like, yeah, now I'm going to hack Tesla. It wasn't like that. It just happened, which will be quite interesting, as we will see now. And the other thing is curiosity. I personally feel like curiosity is one of the main drives every hacker and security researchers should have. So just sitting there and seeing interesting things and then going all in, investigating what exactly is behind it. So curiosity is really key if you are doing security research or if you are going into the hacking space. So I was doing a security audit for a French technology company, and I found a very interesting domain. They had a backup domain. So I wasn't even starting with the security research yet. So I just found that interesting backup subdomain. And I just wanted, because I was thinking, yeah, maybe there's an exposed backup there. Because a lot of times when doing security research, we have those easy finds out there. Those very easy finds, those low-hanging fruits. And I was thinking, yeah, maybe there's a low-hanging fruit there that I could find in an evening or something. But I did enumeration at the backup subdomain, and I found I did a port scan, as you can see here with Nmap, and I found that there's apparently a free CIF server running there. For those who don't know what free CIF is an open source game, and Nmap told me that a game server of that free open source game would run on that backup subdomain, and I was like, no, that doesn't feel right. So why should a game server run on a backup subdomain of a technology company? So I mean, take a look at the other ports. You had HTTP, HTTPS, like your normal web ports. You had remote anything. Of course, that could be something running on a backup server, you remote access, but that free CIF was like, that feels out of order. So I wanted to investigate a bit more and figure out what exactly is that running there, because I didn't believe it is a game server, and I believe that Nmap just falsely classified that. So after doing the basic enumeration steps of the infrastructure environment and finding that interesting piece, I of course wanted to know what exactly is there, and what do? You try to connect via Telnet. So I tried to connect via Telnet to that free CIF server on that backup port to get some service information, to figure out what services are running at that port and what exactly is it. But unfortunately, it opened a connection, but it immediately closed it again. So as you can see here, connection closed by foreign host. So I was like, man, Telnet connection didn't work. So if it, for example, would have been a mail server, then connecting via Telnet would have worked. But in this case, it didn't. So I was wondering, what exactly is it? What do I do now? And why not just putting it into a browser? So that was the next thought I had. And I did exactly that. I put it into a browser, and I found this very interesting piece of software here. Tesla made, what is that? You could see a location that's actually Paris there on the map, and you could see like a Model 3 with a great name and the status, the range. And it was all very interesting. And it also showed like it's locked and there is an update available and it's connected to a power source. And I was like, okay, that looks really interesting. So I wanted to learn more about it. So that's where curiosity comes in, because you have to be curious to investigate stuff like this. And I'm kind of a Tesla fan myself. I really want to have a Tesla because I think it's a fantastic car. Basically, it's a computer on wheels, and I'm a tech guy, so that fits. So I wanted to know how it works, what exactly that software is. You can also see the dashboards button there. I, of course, pressed the dashboards button. It led to nowhere. It just showed me like not found, and I was like, okay, that's a shame. There's a dashboards button, but I can't access it. So I Googled that software. I tried to figure out if there are any public available information, and there are public available information. So it was on GitHub, and that was like a major win, because software that is on GitHub, you can read through the source code, and that's what I did. I started reading through the source code because I was like, man, I want to know how the software works, what data it has, how the authentication works. So how can this piece of software we just saw pull data from this Tesla, see that it's logged, see that it's connected to the power source. So I wanted to know how it works. So I went there and I wanted to read through the authentication flow. I wanted to know how the software actually works. And the main interest of mine was to figure out how the credentials are stored in there, how the credentials flow through there. So do people sign in? Are there tokens somewhere? That was the main interest. So I went to GitHub, and you can see there's the authentication code file there. And you can also see that it says encrypt API tokens. So that's exactly the result of my security research. So after I published my security research, they improved the security by a lot. But we will get to that. We will get to that later. So I was reading through the source code to understand how that software works, because I wanted to get access to either the credentials or to more information. And because pressing the dashboards button didn't work, and I wanted to know how the software is structured, how it works. So I was reading through the authentication source code, which is quite interesting, because this isn't, I personally prefer stuff like Python, and this wasn't a software language I was familiar with. So it was quite interesting to read through that, but I figured out how to do it. I found my way through it. And here, if you take a look at the software code that you see here is part of the sign-in flow. And I was seeing two interesting things. So there indeed are inputs of username and a password. If you take a look at the credentials change set, you have an email string, you have a password string. So that's quite interesting. It also gets validated. And then you also have a credentials put action. So you put the raw credentials that someone inserted into a map and then have it flow through the application. So that's quite interesting. Now you have something as sensitive as a username and a password in the flow of the software. So let's take a look at where exactly that flow continues. And you can see here the sign-in event. So you have a handle function that handles sign-in events. And you have a call there to an API using the credentials that got just inserted, the credentials email and the credentials password. So what is happening here is the software takes the credentials that were inserted and exchanges them for a token with the Tesla API, which is quite interesting because now we are also getting not just the credentials in the software, but we are also having the token, the Tesla API token, now in the flow. And if you take a look there, you can see the tokens that we just got in the software. The tokens get stored, they get saved. I unfortunately didn't find this for the credentials, so it doesn't seem like the software stores the username and the password, but the software, as you can see here, stores the access token and the refresh token. So if you are familiar with API tokens, you already know what this means. If you're not familiar with API tokens, so the access token is the token you use to send commands, to request data. And the refresh token basically is a token that allows you to get a new access token, because the access token and the refresh token, they expire for security research reasons. So those tokens aren't valid forever. Those tokens are only valid for a certain period, and you can use the refresh token to extend the validity period of your access. So that was already very great to have both of them in there, the access token and the refresh token. And you can see here the tokens get created. And if you don't have a token already stored in the database, you basically create a new token set, insert it there. If there are already tokens stored, then it just updates the tokens. And this was quite interesting because whether you had newly created tokens or you had updated access tokens, they simply get inserted into something called repo. So you can see, if you take a look at line number 51 and line number 57, you see it's repo insert or repo update. So now the next question is, what is repo? So you have the access tokens now, which are quite interesting to obtain. And those get inserted into repo. And I'm a security guy, so I was thinking, yeah, sure, repo is some kind of vault. You have a huge security layer around it, so you have like an encryption in there. I actually thought that I would find some clues about encryption before that. So I thought like, yeah, the tokens get requested, so you exchange the username and the password for the token, and then you encrypt the token, and then you store it somewhere securely. So that's what I was expecting. That's what I was thinking about. You can see here, you only have that repo insert and no encryption so far. So what did we discover so far? I mean, you saw the code pieces there, and what we saw is that the tokens get inserted into repo, whatever repo is. We will get to that in a second, without encryption. So the flow is the software exchanges the credentials for API tokens and then stores those tokens without encryption into repo. And as I just said, I originally thought that that repo must be some kind of secure storage method itself that takes care of encryption, because the tokens weren't encrypted in the process so far. So I, of course, wanted to figure out what repo is, because in repo now are our tokens. And we want to get a hold of the tokens, because if we are able to obtain the tokens, then we are able to do cool stuff sending commands to the API. But at this point, I was still just trying to figure out how the software works, because I was really interested to see what's actually under the hood. So I tried to figure out what repo is, and it was quite easy. I just took a look at another file in the software code, and you can see that repo basically simply is an adapter for a Postgres database. So Postgres is a SQL database, a pretty standard one. And I wasn't able to find another data storage in there somewhere. So also data like, is the car charging right now, and what are the miles on the car? Stuff like this gets inserted into repo, into the same Postgres database. So it seems like there's basically one database for everything. You can see that right here, adapter, ecto, adapters, Postgres, as lined out there. And that seems to be the universal database for the whole software application, which I think is quite interesting, because as we just said, we are now thinking that repo must be some kind of secure storage mechanism, because the tokens aren't encrypted yet. So what does that mean? Are we now storing the tokens unencrypted? So that's probably what it means. You have the tokens that are quite sensitive data, and you store those tokens next to all the other data in the database. So you have data like, how many miles did this car drive so far? And you just store the sensitive tokens into the same database. So really, contrary to my belief, the tokens do not get encrypted, and repo is not a secure storage mechanism. It's not a vault. It's not disconnected somewhere. So repo simply is a connector to a normal Postgres database stored on the system where the software is running. And since Postgres is the only data source and the only data storage location there, you have all the data in one place, which is quite interesting. Because what I also figured out when taking a look at the software is that there are some public dashboards that are accessible with no authentication required, as you can see here. That's part of the software piece we just took a look at. And you see here, number of charges, charge in total. You can also see a map. So this guy was driving around from the East Coast to the West Coast and vice versa. So that's quite interesting. You have some data from the database publicly accessible. So that's something interesting to note. And now we have three main things we discovered so far. So the tokens get inserted into repo without encryption. Tokens get stored next to all the other data in the database. And certain data dashboards are accessibly publicly without authentication required. And so I, of course, investigated what happens with the vehicle data stored in the database. And then you see the dashboards with like charging statistics. And that means you can access some data in the database publicly through those dashboards. And if you think about it, just for a split second, you have the tokens in the database, you have public data in the database, like charging statistics. So what if you can just tell the API, I'm a public dashboard, and now please read me the tokens. So that was the idea that came up, because you have one universal storage for the data. Some of them you can access publicly, and also the tokens. So what if I just go ahead and tell the piece of software, hey, I'm a public dashboard, now just not read me charging statistics, but instead read me the access tokens. And I just tried it. So let's try it and then take a look at what happens. Because what is happening, it sends you the access token. And that's super interesting. So I simulated a request a public dashboard would do, but instead of requesting things like charging statistics, I requested the tokens. You can see that here, executed query string, select star from tokens. So I wanted to get the tokens out of there, and it did. I had to censor them for security reasons, because those tokens are basically the keys to the kingdom. Because Tesla API tokens, we can take a look at it again. I just got the tokens out of there, and those are Tesla API tokens. So those API tokens are basically the keys to the kingdom, because what are Tesla API tokens? Tesla API tokens are basically digital car keys with extended remote control functionality. So by obtaining the Tesla API tokens, which act like digital car keys, I was able to do the stuff described previously, like querying accurate vehicle location, turning off sentry mode, unlocking the vehicle door, starting keyless driving, all the stuff I was now able to do by obtaining the tokens out of there, which is quite interesting because I don't have any login to the piece of software, because you require login for certain things, but I basically didn't require that login. I could just tell software, hey, I'm a public dashboard, please read me the tokens instead of some other data. And super interesting, because now I had access to a lot of Teslas. Because I wasn't limited to that one software instance, I actually expanded it around the whole world, because I was interested in, maybe that doesn't only affect this Tesla I have here, those Tesla API tokens that I have here. Maybe this is like a widespread issue. So I ran an internet-wide scan to find more Teslas, to find more affected third-party instances with the vulnerability. So I wrote a small Python script, and I had that Python script running overnight to find vulnerable instances, and yeah, see it for yourself. So those are roads and routes that Tesla drivers took all around the world. You can see the United States of America in there. You can see England, Europe, the West Coast of like San Francisco, LA. You can see Denmark, France, the Netherlands, like all around the world. You had those Teslas, and you had those pieces of third-party software which was vulnerable through the attack ways described here. And now I knew that this is a really huge issue, because now I have control over potentially a few hundred or more Teslas around the world. So the initial scans that I ran showed up multiple hundred results, and then I manually verified it. So just take a look at this. And now I'm sitting here at my desk in Germany. This is how my screen looks. I just realized that I have access to all of those Teslas all around the world. I can see where they are located, where they are driving, and then I can do stuff like unlocking the doors, honking the horn, and turning off sentry mode, and a lot more. So I, of course, really wanted to figure out if this is actually true. So I got in touch with someone who owns one of those Teslas. He owns a Model X. This was quite interesting, because I tweeted about a funny Tesla name on Twitter in regarding to the security research. And then this person reached out to me. He has a Model X with that name. And what are the last 6 digits of the VIN number? So we can confirm it's actually his. So I used the vulnerability, got out the tokens, requested the VIN number, which is like a vehicle identification number, which is unique for every car. So I queried that number and I sent it to him, and I was like, here we go. That's the last 6 digits of the VIN number. And he was like, oh, yeah, that's his car. And then I asked him if he would allow me to run commands on his Tesla. So I asked him if he can give me permission to honk the horn or unlock the doors. And he was like, yeah, go ahead and try to honk the horn if you wish. And that's what I did. So I honked the horn in order to test my theory with like real vehicles, because I can't just go ahead and unlock the doors of a random Tesla I don't own. And you need, in security research, if you do it the right way, you need permission from the owners, in a case like this, from the owners that are affected. And so I requested permission from him to try that, and then I ran commands on his car, and he was like, yeah, he can confirm that this just worked, and that his Tesla in Ireland just honked. So sorry for the neighborhood I scared in Ireland because of a honking Tesla. But this was the point where I knew, yep, what I just discovered actually works, and you can run commands on those Teslas all around the world. So now we are in the vulnerability disclosure process, because I discovered that vulnerability. and I have to report it because I want to get this fixed. Because imagine what people could do. So some person I was talking to mentioned drive somewhere, like driving and ransomware combined. Because imagine you go to your car, you unlock the doors, and the doors just lock again, and you unlock the doors again, and the doors just lock again, and then your car tells you hey, I want Bitcoin, so you're able to drive your car to work. So that's quite a huge issue, and I wanted to get this fixed as soon as possible because, in my opinion, the vulnerability was critical, and also in the opinion of a lot of other people, which we will see later. So I started coordinating with all the involved parties. So I contacted the third-party developer directly. I sent him my report with all the vulnerability details so that we can get a patch out as soon as possible. And luckily, the third-party developer, he was very kind, he responded very quickly, and he's also very interested in the security of his software. So he acted very quickly. I also got in touch with the Tesla product security team because the Tesla product security team is, of course, somewhat involved here. And they notified the affected owners by push notification, by email. They revoked any access to Teslas that might be affected. And it was quite interesting because the Tesla security team revoked multiple thousand API keys. So I have no idea how widespread the issue actually was. So I confirmed access only with around 25 vehicles. After that, I stopped and I was like, yeah, I have to report this. I can't just go ahead and continue getting access to Teslas. I have to report this and I have to get it fixed. So maybe the number was a lot higher because the Tesla product security team acted in that way and revoked thousands of API access tokens. And then I also had to coordinate and release some limited information to affected owners and to the media because the public response was massive. And also the media interested came after that because I was sending a tweet out and it was talking about the security research without sharing the details. And then, of course, I had a lot of affected owners contacting me, a lot of concerned owners actually contacting me because they were like, hey, I own a Tesla. Maybe I'm affected. What should I do? And then I had a lot of media outlets like international media, like Bloomberg and TechCrunch and CNN reaching out, asking me, what exactly is this all about? And I tried to handle this as efficient as possible throughout the process, because you can't just release too much information about a vulnerability if it isn't fixed. And because then if you release detailed information about a vulnerability before the vulnerability is patched, then you open the door for all other people to go ahead and abuse that vulnerability, which I wanted to prevent. So I only was able to release limited information through the public until I was able to release my public write-up, but we will get to that. So let's take a look at the timeline and go a bit more in depth of the research and then also disclosure timeline, because it's a multi-step process. So at first I initially discovered the issue. I got aware of the affected third-party software with that vulnerability during a security audit, as I said. And then curiosity led to me spending quite some time investigating, trying to figure out how the vulnerability works, what is behind it, how the credentials flow through that, as we just talked about. So that was around the end of 2021. And I figured it out and I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. But I didn't even think it's going to be a huge thing until I ran the internet-wide scans, because I wanted to get a sense of the scale of the issue, to find affected instances. So I wrote a small script to run those scans. And yeah, the initial results showed up multiple hundred affected instances of that software with the vulnerability. So that was January 9th. And then I manually verified access to those Teslas, because I was just like, whoa, that's incredible. There are multiple hundred cars affected. But now I was like, I have to verify that's actually the case, that's actually true, before I go ahead and make any claims. So I started this, and I started manually verifying the access, that I was able to get data from those Teslas, that I would have been able to send commands to those Teslas. That's something I was very, very careful, because as I just said, you only send commands with permission of the owners. But I was able to verify that those access tokens were valid without actually sending commands to the Tesla. So that was very great. And so as time progressed, I had confirmed access to more and more vehicles around the world. So at first I was like, that's crazy. I have like access to 5 vehicles, and then it was like 10, and then 15, and then 20, and well, then 25. And yeah, after I had verified access to more than 25 cars around the world in 13 countries, I was like, yeah, no, I have to stop right there and start the reporting process, which I did. I reported the vulnerability. I did a coordination between the parties. So I sent a detailed reports to the third-party developer, to the Tesla security team. And I also then wrote the tweet, which blew up and got a lot of media attention. Maybe some of you already know what I'm talking about. The tweet where I was like, hey, I have access to over 20 Teslas in like 10 countries. This is crazy. And yeah, that just blew up, got a lot of media attention. This was 2 days later after the initial internet-wide scans on January 11th. I sent a tweet. For those who are interested in like the full timeline, because there were a lot of steps in between, a lot of smaller steps in between, just go to my Medium article with like the detailed vulnerability details. So just checked it out. Then a fix and mitigation got rolled out very quickly. So after the day I reported my vulnerability to the involved parties, we already had those involved parties acting, publishing a patch, revoking potentially exposed vehicle access, notifying the affected owners. So I'm very glad that the people I shared those details with of the involved parties understood the scale, the risk, and then acted very quickly. So I'm very glad that happened this way. So, and then after I verified the patch actually worked, that a patch was getting rolled out, that the access to those cars is getting closed, then I got ready to release a public write-up to inform the public, to inform the media about the exact vulnerability details. So those people that only had limited information can now check out what was exactly happening with the vulnerability there. So I published that public write-up, and then I also submitted the information about the vulnerability to Mitre. A lot of you watching probably know what Mitre is and what CFEs are. I will not go into that. So I sent them the information, they reviewed that, and then assigned a CFE. And I already knew that the CFE is going to have a high rating, but how high the rating is going to be was like just incredible, because as you can see here, they rated the CFE with a base score of 9.8, and you know the scale is like from 0 to 10, so 9.8 is like probably one of the highest ratings you can get, and it is of course a critical vulnerability. So I sent them the information, and then the National Vulnerability Database analysts of the US government took a look at the vulnerability, took a look at the risks of the vulnerability, how easy it is to exploit, and then assigned that rating, which I think is really incredible. But it's a rating that fits, because if you have like a guy from Germany sitting on his desk, and within a few hours he is able to control critical features of Teslas around the world, then the vulnerability, the underlying vulnerability, is definitely a critical one. So also feel free to check out the CFE. And it's quite interesting because there were a few key learnings throughout the process that I had about automotive cybersecurity. I personally feel like automotive cybersecurity is really cool. We all know the famous Jeep hack of Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek, and this was like super interesting and to watch back then in 2015. And I downloaded their research paper, I read the report, and I was like, oh man, that's so cool. Automotive cybersecurity is so cool. So it's definitely a topic I was interested in, but now I was like super involved in automotive cybersecurity, and it was quite interesting to have a few key learnings here. So you don't have to hack a car to hack a car. So that was probably one of the most interesting things I realized, because we are expanding the ecosystems around cars so much. It's not about the car anymore. We have an ecosystem around it, which is huge, but we will get to that in the second part of the session. But the future ecosystem will be one of the main attack vectors when it comes to automotive security. The second key learning is security research is becoming more important, especially in automotive, because if we don't find the vulnerabilities in the vehicles of tomorrow, the threat actors will. And that's a huge risk. So I'm glad there are things like the Automotive Security Research Group, and also things like the Cyber Auto Challenge from Karl Heimer. And I'm very glad we are already taking steps to improve security research in automotive, to expand security research in automotive, because this is definitely, it's already important now, and it's becoming so increasingly important for the future, because we as security researchers have to find a vulnerability before the bad guys do, because the risks are just incredibly huge. But we will also get to that in the second part of the session. So the third key learning, which I think is quite interesting, there are substantial entry-level barriers if you want to get into automotive cybersecurity. It's really hard to get into automotive cybersecurity because you need substantial resources. What do I mean by that? Well, you need a car. I personally would have started with automotive cybersecurity research a lot earlier if I would have had access to like a spare car where I would have been able to do security research. So that's something we really have to take a look at as cybersecurity community, to bring down the entry-level barriers. The Automotive Security Research Group is doing a great job there, releasing knowledge, releasing tools, building a network of the community. But that's something I noticed, because also now I would love to continue do automotive cybersecurity research. I mean, I already had like a huge success with that Tesla security research here, but now I want to take a look at a lot more stuff. I want to take a look at the physical Tesla car itself. I want to take a look at a Volkswagen, a Porsche, but I just can't afford to buy a 70,000 euro car and then risk to break it. So that's something was quite interesting to observe, because I was like, hey, that's so cool, the security research with the Teslas. Now I want to continue in that space. But how do you continue into a space like the automotive cybersecurity space if you don't have a car? So that's something we have to take a look at as community. And that was something I noticed during the process, basically after the process, where I was like, what's next? So what's next for me? I want to continue doing that, but it's just like really hard. And it's quite interesting to see the response I got from the industry, from the cybersecurity industry, because Schleisel said in a CNN business interview that it's a wake-up call to the entire industry. So that's what he said about my hack, about my security research. And I think that's something we have to act on. We have to act on this wake-up call to the entire automotive and automotive cybersecurity industry. So let's talk about why the automotive ecosystem needs to be secure. The automotive landscape is changing very fast, and so is the automotive ecosystem. And we just have to keep an eye on the increased attack surfaces, because it is changing a lot, as we will see in the following slides. So the talking points here basically include like the increasing attack surface, and then also the risks and the dangers of the automotive ecosystem. Let's take a look at cars 80 years ago. It's a beautiful Jeep here, probably from, I think it's from World War II. And you had like no digital technology involved at all. It's like just the mechanics, just the car drives, you have your accelerator, you have your brake, you have your steering wheel, and that's it. And that's how the cars looked back then. And then we came into like the digital age, and we put like computers into everything. And then we had like the traditional attack surface of cars. You had like the tire pressure monitoring system. You had like, of course, the CAN bus, the CAN bus was like in the focus of automotive security research quite a lot. You also have stuff like the Wi-Fi and GSM module. That's also something you can see in the research of the GPAC from 2015, how those guys were able to, like, over the mobile cellular network, were able to communicate with the car. So you had this traditional attack surface. That's where a lot of the automotive security research focused on, but it's changing very, very rapidly right now. It's changing incredibly fast because now we have electric vehicles, and electric vehicles are like just those digital boxes all along. And let's take a look at the future attack surface. As you can see, you have a lot more stuff than only the traditional. You have like electric vehicle charging ports, because if you take a look at the Tesla supercharger is exchanging data with the car. They are talking with each other. You have, as we just saw in the previous section of this talk, you have those third-party apps, whether those are external third-party apps that people install themselves or in-car app store apps. That's something that's not quite there yet, but Tesla is actively working on an in-car app store. And that's going to be quite interesting how this is going to be in the future, because if you take a look at Android and the Google Play Store, I mean, there's quite a ton of malware in there. So how is this going to look in the automotive space? We have to be very careful there. Then you have like mobile apps for all your cars. You have those APIs the cars communicate with. If you take a look at modern cars, those cars have APIs. They have a constant connection to like the manufacturer for like stuff like fleet servers, so that the automaker can like monitor their fleet. You have like over-the-air updates that get distributed from the infrastructure of the automaker to the cars on the roads. That's something. And then we are also going to digitalize all the other aspects of driving. I mean, we are going to have like smart roads. We are going to have like traffic lights that communicate with the car. We have vehicle-to-vehicle communication. So all that digitalized traffic management is going to be quite interesting. So let's go back. That was the attack surface 80 years ago, basically nothing. That's the traditional attack surface with like a few selected attack vectors of a car that is getting digitalized more and more. And that's how it's going to look in the future. Just a ton of new attack vectors. It's expanding rapidly, and we have to make sure that every single one of those attack vectors, and also the attack surface of cars that are just getting on the road now, we have to make sure this is secure, because we are connecting modern vehicles to an array of external communications in a massive extent. We are going to have communication between so many things, between so many parties. You have a car that is talking to other vehicles, that is talking to the road it's driving on, that is talking to the traffic lights that is a few hundred meters ahead, that is talking to the fleet server of the automaker that is maybe just downloading an over-the-air software update. And we are not only doing this with a small number of like test cars, we are already doing this with a massive number of cars. We are doing this to hundreds of millions of cars out there. And the risks of automotive cyber attacks are a reality. So there's a wide range of critical risks. And I mean, I don't want to scare anyone here, but with the pictures of cars crashing into something, but this is not something that is far into the future. I mean, we already had cyber attacks on cars, luckily only in like security research environments, but you already had cars crashing into stuff. So malicious cyber attacks on vehicles and the automotive ecosystem can have like disastrous outcomes, not just affecting the public image of the automaker or the OEM, but also like direct physical impact on human lives, for example. And that's something we have to take very seriously, because imagine a fleet hacked by a threat actor with malicious intent. I mean, that's a worst case scenario, and we have to avoid that at all costs. And yeah, as said, luckily those hacks only have been demonstrated by security researchers now, but this already shows that it's technically possible to find a vulnerability, to find a 0-day in a car, and then have this car doing a rampage. And here's something quite interesting. So, as I said in the beginning, I was at the World Government Summit this year. The World Government Summit was in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. And you had like a lot of very important people there. And it was quite interesting that I catch those videos, because take a look at this. I mean, it looks like it's from a movie. I mean, you of course already have seen action movies with like those presidential motorcades. And it was quite interesting to capture that in Dubai at the World Government Summit, because you have a lot of important people there, and those people have to be transported somehow. And what is one of the most common ways of transporting people, also important people? Cars. So now imagine you have a hacked government motorcade. Imagine a malicious threat actor goes ahead and attacks, maybe with a 0-day, a government motorcade transporting like VIPs, ministers, heads of states, like international terrorist organizations. I mean, imagine if those gain capability to hack the vehicles in a government motorcade. I mean, it sounds like it's from a new action movie, but if you take a look at the developments and published security research over the past years in the automotive security research space, this is absolutely a risk we should take into consideration. That's nothing far into the future. And the IT infrastructure of Germany's military-run transport fleet already got hacked in 2020, showcasing that threat actors are indeed interested in this vector. And why should a terrorist organization go ahead and attack those motorcades physically, which is quite hard, if they can just develop a 0-day and then go ahead and have those cars crashing into something? This is a huge risk, not just for automakers and OEMs or the cybersecurity companies in that space, but also something for governments. So we need regulation there, and it's quite good to see something like the WP29 from the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, that is a baseline for automotive cybersecurity, which now a lot of automakers have to take care of. But that's just quite interesting if we are talking about the risks of automotive cybersecurity, how huge the range is, from like crashing cars to taking over government motorcades. And we need a more holistic approach here, especially because cybersecurity in mobility is this huge and extensive topic. It's not like a small topic we are talking about. It's really big, and it's involving a lot of different parties, a lot of different technologies, and a lot of different things we have to take into consideration. That's why we need to tackle this topic with a holistic approach rather than those silo solutions. Because what we can observe in a lot of other cybersecurity spaces is that there are those silo solutions from companies, from cybersecurity vendors, and those are not working together. So we need to take a holistic approach. If we are taking a look at the vehicles and the ecosystem, so we can't only focus on the vehicles, we have to focus on the ecosystem. And that's perfectly demonstrated by the hack we talked about in the first part of this talk. We not only have to secure the vehicle alone anymore, but also whatever it touches, like the cloud infrastructure, smart roads, and everything in between. That's one thing we have to be holistic regarding the approach of cybersecurity. The other thing, as said, is the whole automotive industry, whether it's OEMs, automakers, cybersecurity researchers, cybersecurity companies, or the community, because as someone I really value in that space, that an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. And this quote pretty much perfectly sums up why the automotive industry is in this together. We can't work on silo solutions. We need an industry-wide effort to tackle cybersecurity in automotive. And it's quite interesting because automotive is only one sector in mobility. And cybersecurity in mobility is even a huger topic than cybersecurity in automotive. And cybersecurity in mobility is already a topic that affects hundreds of millions of lives, and we are still only at the beginning of it. the number of things we have to discuss are massive skill shortage and talent shortage. That's something we have to take a look at, because also in the innovation in mobility and cybersecurity, we need to take a look at this. There are going to be a lot of things upcoming, like passenger drones. It's of course of a future vision, but we have companies working on it. We have government regulators working on bringing drones to the skies within the next decade. Passenger drones transporting people, and that's also some form of mobility. We as mobility cybersecurity community have to take a look at. So it's not only cars, it's also passenger drones and airplanes and boats and yachts. And so we have to take a look at this in just a few steps, because future of mobility is massive growth. Take a look at automotive. The growth is going to be incredible. We are producing around like a few 100 million cars over the next years. I think until 2050 we are going to produce probably billions of cars. And then if we are taking a look at more innovative spaces like passenger drones, the growth is going to be very fast, because right now it's a concept, it's a vision, it's a cool idea. But once we have like working solutions, once we have approved that this is actually something we are going to implement, then it's going to explode. Then we are going to, like, from just a few experimental passenger drones to a wide rollout on a global scale. So we have to make sure that's something we take a look at. And also airplanes. I mean, airplanes in service worldwide, you see like the huge dent, because the huge drop in there because of COVID. But now that COVID is slowly fading away, we are going to be in that growth again, because if you take a look at population growth, I mean, we are going to have a lot more people on this planet in the next two decades, in the next 3 decades. And those people need a way of mobility. Those people need a way of transportation. So no matter what statistic you look at, if it's automotive, drones, airplanes, boats, it's just going up. So as I just said, future of mobility is massive growth. And there are a number of steps we have to do to ensure a secure future there. Because right now we are still at the beginning, and there is a perfect quote that sums it up, in my opinion. E-mobility is still a bit of a wild west when it comes to cybersecurity. And that's basically true, but not only e-mobility, but then also passenger drones and stuff like this. So if we are taking a look at cybersecurity in mobility, we have to take care of a few things, in my opinion. We have to collaborate together. In the mobility cybersecurity space, we need joint collaboration, and the Automotive Cybersecurity Research Group, the Auto ISAC, are a few great examples of this already starting, of this already evolving, but we just need this to be stronger. We need the whole community, the whole industries collaborating together on this issue. We need to create future talent. That's going to be a key thing, because without creating the next generation of mobility cybersecurity talent, we basically already failed the huge challenge that is in front of us before even starting. Because how are you going to implement all the other steps if you don't have the talent? But I will talk about this in a minute. And then we need to enhance capabilities, because it's a complex challenge. Cybersecurity and mobility, whether you take a look at it in automotive or like the airspace industry, it's a complex challenge, and we have to enhance the capabilities to create solutions for all the involved parties, for the various stakeholders, whether it's an auditor, a government regulator, the OEMs developing new stuff, the cybersecurity companies testing the security of different products. We need to enhance capabilities there. And we have to do this fast. We have to take action really fast. This isn't something we have the next 3 decades for. We have to start now and act very fast in order to ensure the vehicles of the future are in a secure ecosystem. And let's talk a bit more about talent, because without talent in mobility cybersecurity, we won't succeed. We already have a massive skill shortage in cybersecurity right now. And this isn't going to be better, this is going to be worse. So we have to create those talents there, because I feel like whether we collaborate together, enhance the capabilities, take action fast, creating cybersecurity mobility talent, we need to do this. We need to create a future talent in that space. This is going to be a key puzzle piece that enables all the other things I just talked about. So creating the next generation security talent in mobility, that's a mission we all should have, whether you are an automaker, whether you are a cybersecurity company in that space. If you're only a security researcher, we all should working on a mission to create that next generation security talent. It's just super important. And then we all have to work together to secure tomorrow's mobility. I already talked about this throughout the presentation at various moments, that we need this collaboration. And whether it's an OEM, global organizations, cybersecurity companies, the cybersecurity community, we are in this together, and we have the chance to tackle the issue. We have the chance to tackle the challenge and build a secure future in mobility. That's what we have to do. And I want to thank you all for listening. Thanks very much. Please, let's stay in touch. If there are any questions, just reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or shoot me an email. I would love to chat with you all. And thanks very much for listening, and see you next time.